Hello, my name is Sheena with Rise Wellness, and this is Activate Your Genius. Today I'm going to be exploring the 59th gene key from Richard Rudd's book, The Gene Keys. This is my interpretation of the transformational path of the shadow of dishonesty to the gift state of intimacy and the highest destiny path or Siddhi of transparency. This gene, like all of them, is related to the way that we connect with one another. A lot of these genes we see through our relationships. So when we come to explore dishonesty, it all begins with us. We are dishonest with ourselves when we don't move through our trauma. The dilemma of this shadow is trauma. We tell ourselves so many lies. We adopt so many belief systems. We adopt all these behaviors and survival traits in order to make through our traumatic experiences. And this shadow invites us to sit with all of them and figure out how we've been traumatized, heal from that place so that we can move through life way more cleanly, way more transparent. At the root of all of these low frequencies, we are either repressing something about us that's been victimized and hurt, or we're projecting it, we're blaming it, we're reactively externalizing it onto others. So this passage is about looking at the ways that we've been dishonest and the ways that we have not owned our shit and dealt with our own traumas. As we go inward, we are going to discover layer upon layer upon layer of trauma and pain and suffering and hurt, and that's hard. You know, in the Indian philosophy and religion, they use the term Samskaras. Samskaras is these ancestral wounds that we've collected. In science, we have always known that we are a collection of our genes, but now scientists are recognizing that we're just not made up of our genes, but all of our epigenetics as well. This is our environment. These are our ancestral wounds that we hold on to, and we still don't even know how many lifetimes that goes back. In some cases, they say 7 generations. In other cases, they say 21 generations. That's a whole lot of shit that we're holding on to that a lot of us aren't even aware of. Sometimes we'll do anything not to own our own trauma, and so we project it out onto others. If we could fully own the source of our projection, then we'd never have to blame anyone for anything ever again. So to activate your genius, I invite you to ask yourself, how are you showing up in your relationships to anyone, to anything? Is there anything that you don't accept? And can you dig deep into what that not acceptance is, where that judgment is? Be honest. This gene begs you to be honest with yourself. It all starts from here. If there's any difficulties that you're experiencing, there's something unhealed in you that needs tending to. There's some form of you that needs nurturing. It could be your 5-year-old self. It could be your 15-year-old self. It could be your 50-year-old self. But there's some part of you, if you're experiencing conflict and difficulties in your environment, there is something unhealed that you need to dig deep into. All that judgment is that projection of that unhealed part of yourself. It's blaming, it's complaining, it's repressing, it's suppressing, or it's victimizing, or it's externally reacting. But you have to root out your dishonesty by coming clean, by digging deep, by owning your shit. In my experience of pulling back layers and layers and layers, I've come to really understand how much of this stuff isn't even mine. that I've been holding on to. And I'm only considering the limiting beliefs that I've adopted, and now I can strip off from the layers of conditioning that I see in my family of origin, in my peer groups, in my society, in my environment. And I'm only considering this lifetime. Now take that back 20 plus generations of trauma. That's the thing about so much of this is a lot of us aren't even aware that any of it's there. A lot of us are so busy distracting ourselves from our own suffering that we don't take the time to dig deep. Our dishonesty is any part of us that doesn't own our trauma. So in the spirit of being transparent, I'm going to open up and share a personal experience of my passage through this gene. So in my contemplation, I have considered myself the peacekeeper. I want to avoid conflict. I want to make life easier on everyone around me, so I try to keep the peace. So as I contemplated that, and I dug a little deeper, and I removed a layer of that, I started to ask myself, who am I really keeping the peace for? And that's when I realized that I was keeping my own peace. When I could really, really take the time to dig deep, I could uncover a trauma from my early childhood, maybe 5 years old, where I suffered. I went to my parents to tell them that I suffered, and I expected to be consoled. I expected empathy. I expected a remedy, a solution, a solving to this problem that I had so that I would never have to experience it again. And guess what? I didn't get it. I didn't get any of that. And in my 5-year-old brain, I developed this notion that I'm not going to speak up anymore because that hurt too much. Because now, in addition to my suffering, I had also this disappointment of having these unmet expectations. And I developed this ego brain, these limiting beliefs that said, I'm not worth love. I'm not worth healing. I had developed this notion that I wasn't worthy of empathy and support. And so I moved through life for a long time saying, I'm no longer going to tell people what I need when I'm suffering because I've already dealt with the worst trauma, and that trauma was being 5 years old and not getting the healing that I expected to get from my caregivers. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to myself anymore. So, 25 years later, you're driving down the car, you're driving with your partner and he asks what's wrong and you're like, nothing. Big fat liar, right? You're being a complete fraud because there is something wrong. But you're afraid because you've developed all of these survival traits around not being vulnerable and sharing that because you've already experienced the worst trauma. That's what all this trauma is. You've already experienced the worst thing. You're just afraid of it happening again. So you don't speak up. You don't say that anything's wrong. You get manipulative. And you don't realize it, but you're being manipulative. But if your partner is sensing something's wrong enough to ask you, then saying nothing is only going to hijack your experience together. It's going to disconnect you from intimacy. So this manipulative pattern comes out when we don't tell people what we need, we don't heal from that suffering, and we just keep trying to move through life, trying to control the outcomes. In a repressive nature, the repressed nature is exclusion. We stop going out. We stop accepting invitations, but not even accepting invitations. We feel so excluded that we separate ourselves from our relationships so that they don't invite us anymore. And then we play the victim card that we were excluded from something. So we can see how this plays out. In a reactive nature, This is the person that won't deal with being excluded, so they're going to break down your walls. They're going to break down your door. There's no way I'm not coming to this party. There's no way I'm not going to be a part of this experience. I will penetrate your aura so deep to avoid that exclusion. And all of this is coming from that unhealed victim place. So once I took the time to dig deep, then I could go into a meditative state and I could console that little child and say, you know what? That was really hard. You went through something difficult. You expected support. You expected your caregivers to fix the problem and provide a solution so that you never experienced it again. You expected this empathy, and when you didn't get it, that must have been really hard. I'm sorry that I wasn't there then to be with you in that time. But guess what? I'm here now. Now I have the tools to be there, to console you, to hold you, to love on you, to nurture you, to give you that empathy and support that you didn't get then. And that's how you heal. That's how this healing all happens. It starts with consoling that version of you that's been playing victim and adopting all of these survival traits not to feel that trauma again. Once you heal that victim, you won't experience that same trauma. So now, when your partner is asking you, hey, what's up? What's wrong? You can say, you know what? Do you have the emotional capacity to talk about this right now? Because now I've moved through this, and I'd love to tell you that I feel like my shadow is coming up right now. I still have this limiting belief in my brain that I'm not worthy of love, I'm not worthy of empathy or support, or in order to bypass two traumas, I'm going to deal with something hard on my own. Because if I don't have my expectations met, that disappointment is going to lead to further suffering, and that's what I want to avoid. So that's where I'm at right now. And when you can have that level of intimacy and transparency with your partner, something really beautiful happens. You connect with each other in this much deeper place. So we have to realize where that trauma is coming from, what version of you is holding on to something. That projection, that blame, that suffering gets put out for external validation. And it's not your partner's responsibility to heal that 5-year-old self. It's not your partner's responsibility to heal any of those traumas that you experienced in childhood. It's yours. It's always yours. You manipulate your relationships when you think someone else is supposed to fix you, to solve the problems. These problems went on way before they came into the picture. And you know what? It's not my parents' fault either that they didn't nurture that 5-year-old self. They're human. They're imperfect. They're going to make mistakes. It's not my place to hold them responsible for the rest of their lives. They were still growing up too. It's my responsibility to take full ownership and deal with this shit. As mucky and as uncomfortable as it is, this stuff is painful, but when you do, you become more transparent. You don't play the victim anymore. So the gift of the 59th gene is intimacy. If you haven't checked out my video on the 55th gene, make sure you do that. I'm not going to go into detail on the new earth that's forming, the big changes that are happening, but they are talked about in that gene extensively. So what is about to emerge is this sacred union. This intimacy is like something that we've never had before. We are having these highest destiny path of freedom emerging alongside this programming partner of transparency. These genes are prophetic. This whole gene key system is prophetic, and these are preparing us for what's to come. So the gift of intimacy is one heart opening up to this universal heart. We're going from I to we, and this intimacy is a collective experience. It's true love in all sense of the word. It's a shared awareness. There's no more hidden agendas. There's no more dishonesty. There's just transparency. There's just unconditional, universal love. All of our traumas are coming out in the collective to be purged. And that's hard. It's going to take work. It's going to take time. We have to be patient with ourselves while we heal. We have to be patient with society, with our environment, as that goes through that collective suffering in order to heal. Our relationships are the field for this quantum leap of our evolution. We just have to be patient. This 59th gene is part of the codon ring of union. This is the romantic longing to merge with another in love in a way that's never delivered to us before. I feel this embedded in my DNA, and it's not even part of my hologenetic profile. But there's this ancestral trauma that I carry of this longing for this sacred union that I feel like I've gotten so close, but I haven't gotten there yet. And I feel like this is the lifetime where I get there. This is the longing that I've been after. This passage is about sex. It's about moving from trauma to tantra, but I don't just mean physical sex. That's part of it, but it's deeper than that. Intimacy is an internal experience. When we have kindness and compassion for ourselves, we have more kindness and compassion for everyone else's heart. When we do the work, we know how hard it is to do that. So we have more empathy as everybody else moves through that process. Intimacy isn't about pouring our hearts onto our partner's hearts. We realize that's unfair, that's unkind. It's about healing from within so that we tend to our own wounds and we don't have these expectation, this external validation that our partners are going to heal us. That's not what they're here for. We're going to heal our own wounds, so we don't project that. We don't put that impossible process onto somebody else. We're not going to let our partners drown in our suffering. That's not kind. That's not compassion. That doesn't come from our highest place. When we move out of our suffering, we can be the partners that we wish to have on a deeper level. Our relationships are more clean because they don't have these hidden agendas behind them. My favorite form of true intimacy is just like literally sharing the silence with someone. You know, you're on your computer, I'm reading a book, we're just sharing the space with one another. No words are needed. Communication might even lose the intimacy in those moments. We share this energy with one another that doesn't need words. There is a divine intimacy, I feel, when we get to that place that we don't have to fill the void, the no-thingness with words. It's deeper than that. It's more than that. It doesn't even have to be in the physical touch. It's deeper than that. It's sharing that level of intimacy that's allowed to have the silence, that enjoys the silence. When we've worked through our traumas, we love unconditionally. We're not trying to change our partners. In fact, we wouldn't even think of it. We wouldn't dream of it. We wouldn't want to. We can love without these conditions. And maybe that inspires our partner to dig deeper and do their work. And maybe it doesn't. And maybe they do it in their next relationship with a different partner. It doesn't matter because we don't have these projections. We've already healed our own self, so we're not getting triggered by the behaviors of everyone else. It sounds like a big ask, right? It sounds like an unattainable passage to freedom of not getting triggered by others' behaviors, but that's what this process is leading us to. Our hearts don't close because we react to somebody else's behavior. When you've truly healed from your own suffering, your heart stays open forever and ever and ever. My friends and I use the metaphor churning the compost when we're talking about shadow work, and I love that metaphor because that's what these traumas are. It's this compost. But guess what? There's so much richness in the soil of that compost. We just need to churn it. We need to get in there and dig through it and dig deep into it. It's full of nutrients. When we really dig into these traumas, ancestral or from this lifetime, there's a nectar in all of it. That nectar is love, it's compassion, it's empathy, it's grace, it's all these siddhis, it's all of these highest destiny paths. The 59th siddhi. This is the siddhi of transparency. This siddhi opens up alongside of its programming partner of freedom. In the 59th gene, or in the 55th gene, we said there's only two behaviors. There's the victim behavior, and there's the place that's free from the victim behavior. So as we move through this passage of transparency, freedom comes as a byproduct of this transparency. Richard Rudd makes this disclaimer in this gene where he says that, maybe these prophecies are total bullshit. Maybe this is just this hopeless, romantic, poetic dream that will never come to fruition. Or maybe it's so true that it's embedded in our DNA, and our passage through them is this return to this universal love. And when we hold this vision for this new earth and this sacred marriage and this divine union, we can get through the uncomfortable feelings that come in the shadow work, in dealing with the trauma. And Richard Rudd has made a life of sharing this wisdom. And I know just on year 2 of studying extensively these genes, the activation that's happening in my DNA, that I can't think that this is some hopeless romantic pipeline dream of something that won't come to fruition. That's not what I believe. I believe in every cell in my being that this is the truth, that this is the epoch, that this is the evolution, that this is the happily ever after. And I'm a Pisces, and I share his primary gift of truth. So it only makes sense to me that I would be so in love with this concept. But I put my life on the line too. There's people out there that are going to think that I've completely lost my mind and I'm a complete lunatic for sharing this information as truth. And so be it. I welcome it. I have so much peace behind what I'm saying that it doesn't bother me in the least bit if there's people that'll think that I'm completely nuts. I'm just called to share the information. Moving through these genes for me is not about learning. And then this is a lot of information to take in, but it's about remembering. All of these passages are a process of remembering from me. So the 55th video is going to share about that new earth. But this siddhi right here in the 59th gene, this is about the sacred marriage. This is about the dream of the true love and high romance, and the 21st century is going to see it come to fruition. I have no doubt. I don't know if it'll be in my human lifetime, but it'll absolutely be in my lifetime. Fear is nothing but a boundary membrane that we have to pass through in order to meet the next dimension of our evolution. We've been so fascinated about fear up until now. Our evolution has been based on fear. Our fear of each other is what causes friction. That friction is what causes attraction. That attraction has been necessary to get us to this place for our evolution. That fear was necessary up until now. In the 55th gene, I said, Eckhart Tolle's quote, "Suffering is only necessary until you realize that it is not necessary." Fear was only necessary for our reproduction to get us to this place where now that we can realize it's no longer necessary. We've talked about the new children are emerging without this victim consciousness, without this fear, without the chemicals in their body that require this fear. So what's so fascinating is as we move out of these comfort zones, we move out of the need for reproduction. So up until now, we've needed it because if we didn't have that fear, that friction, then we would have been an inbred species and we would have gone extinct. So as every single individual and collective act up until now has been necessary to get us right here. This ecstatic union, this dual awakening that we're about to experience is bigger than sex. Reproduction isn't at the forefront anymore because as fear is eradicated, so goes our fear of death. We know that we're immortal. We don't need sex in order to repopulate anymore. And, I'm talking, this could be centuries out. So I'm not talking about our near future, but this is the trajectory. The I Ching hexagram for the 59th gene is dispersion. Dispersion is spreading of the seed. So way back in our ancient history, we knew that ultimately from our collective shadow, our low frequency, that this dispersion was necessary for our evolution and our survival as a species. Throughout history, men have been wanting to spread their seed, while women have been wanting to trap these men. Well, the freedom of the man dispersing his seed was leading to that procreation, that reproduction, that evolution of his species, that breeding. The woman wanted to trap the man to ensure her survival, her reproduction of her breed, her species. So we had this conundrum. So, the woman wants to trap the man and because of that is seeking more and more freedom. But as we go into this one awareness, this sacred union, that goes away. That disharmony with the exes, the sexes now goes away. The reactive nature of this gene is intrusive, as we mentioned before. And in human design, one of the key words in this passage is penetration. So in the gene keys, we would say we want to intrude on someone's aura. In the human design, we want to say we penetrate someone's aura. Penetrate someone's aura is breaking down these walls to let us in, but there's no mistaking the fact that the theme of this passage, of this gene, is all in sexuality. The biology behind this gene is in our sexual organs. The chakra aligned in this gene is our sacral chakra. That's our chakra for reproduction, for sexual intimacy, for creativity. So the theme around sexuality spreads all throughout this gene. The amino acid for the programming partner in the 55th gene is histidine. And what is histidine? But this is the chemical that goes off during the physical orgasm. And so in these new sacred unions, these orgasms are like nothing we've experienced. The fear is abolished. The reproduction eventually becomes unnecessary. Our species is going to become more androgynous. And it's like this new level of intimacy and this lovemaking is formed. That's like a star orgasming and creating a brand new galaxy, another universe. It's just different. We're not used to it. We haven't experienced it. We don't even know what it looks like yet. When we tell our partners we love them, we tell them we love them forever and ever and ever and ever through all of our lifetimes, because we're going to get to experience that love forever and forever and forever. And we realize that we're one heart. This transparency, it cleans us of our past. It dilutes us of all of our toxins. It cleans us from the inside out. This is our genetic laundry. And we're coming together not only in couples, but in sacred geometries. These might be threes, these might be fours, these might be different patterns that we haven't even conceived yet. We have countless sacred marriages offering all of these uniqueness, these unique aspects to our relationships. Belonging to someone is a ridiculous concept. That's no longer a part of our thinking anymore. We don't belong to somebody. We're not a prisoner held hostage. We're not a possession to be owned. We don't belong to someone. We rise in love. We don't fall down here. We rise. We experience the deepest kind of intimacy imaginable. Sexuality came from our reptilian brain. We're no longer operating from that low frequency. So this is an orgy, but it's this pure bliss, not even coming from a sexual desire, and we're the most orgasmic species in the universe. What's incredible here is that we abolish all of our fear. Yes, we're going to move from the I to the we, but even in this new awareness, we don't lose our individuality. We still came here with our uniqueness, and it's not going away. We are the creators, but we're creating something new, something more than more of us. We still came here to be unique and different. We're transparent in our uniqueness. We're moving through life so cleanly that there's no hidden agenda. We get it all. We get the ultimate dream. We get the ultimate happily ever after. We come back to this universal love. And that's the real meaning of this transparency. So I hope none of this information makes you nervous. Where are we on this trajectory? Who knows? We are already seeing these new children being born. We're going to start to see more peacefulness in the families as they develop and as we recognize that they're not addicted to these fear victim conscious patterns. We have to take out the genetic laundry. We have to transform our traumas. The more we uncover all of our traumas, the more we uncover these universal truths. These universal truths are love. This love is peace. This peace is expansiveness and freedom and spaciousness. We have more compassion. We have more grace. Our hearts remain open, not only to experience freedom, but pure bliss, orgasm after orgasm after orgasm. This is the fastest gene in us transforming. So even in my contemplation of what's out now in 2022, this is Richard Rudd's third version of this gene, because he's saying it's changing so fast, so rapidly within us. It's almost dizzying. This is the gene of the genetic code of the whirlwind, and it is a whirlwind. So how do you activate your genius? What are some questions for contemplation on this? I invite you to think about how you may be suppressing your sexual appetite, or what are your creative blockages, because that sacral chakra is just as much about creativity as it is sexuality. Can you consider honestly, are you giving your partner the same level of freedom that you expect to have? And what does transparency mean to you? Does this movement to transparency excite you, or does it terrify you? I have this belief system that at some point we were telepathic and we shared this awareness. And then at some point or another, we stopped living so cleanly. We started having these hidden agendas, and we developed this illusion of separateness. And in that separateness, we lost that power of telepathically connecting to one another. So as we go back to that, some of us might find that really scary. But, I invite you to consider how it already shows up. Those times that you're thinking of a friend and then they start calling or texting, they reach out to you. So it's already been there. We're just returning back to it. So I invite you to contemplate, how can you add more transparency to your life? Where are your hidden agendas? Are you not being your true authentic self in your relationship? Is there a way that you are manipulative in your manipulating your partners, or in your job, or in your relationship to family or to others? Where is your hidden agenda? Are you willing to take the time to do the work, to dig deep, to recover, to heal? Do you know that you're worth healing? I don't think that my experience of adopting these beliefs is that unique. I think that from connecting with others, there's a lot of us that have that. And how silly is it that one experience when we were 5 could have evolved into who we are now, with all of this survival reptilian brain adopting these behaviors as a way to protect us. We put these cages around our heart. We build these wall-ups. They're all defensive tools. We already experienced the worst trauma. That trauma happened when we were little and we didn't have the awareness around it. We didn't have the resources that we have now. But guess what? Every time that you uncover one of these traumas, you can go into that version of yourself as who you are today. You can hug them. You can nurture them. You can give them time and patience and empathy and compassion and all of those things that you didn't get. You can give to yourself now. And how beautiful is that? You deserve all that love, that empathy, that support. Give yourself time. Take deep breaths. Know this work is hard, but it's worth it. You are worth it. You always have been. This universal love, it's for you. This unconditional love has no hidden agenda. It's transparent. It's clean. I love you. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you listening. I'm going to put the link to the programming partner, the 55th Gene, in the link in the description. Make sure you check it out. It's going to give you a deeper concept into what's emerging, what's coming next. I hope you'll give it a listen. If you like this video, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up. You'll like it, you'll subscribe, you'll comment, you'll tell your friends. You can follow my journey as I explore and teach these genes on my Instagram page at Rise Wellness Coaching. Please send me a message. Let me know how you're activating your genius. This work is hard, but it's worth it. You are worth it. I love you. Namaste.